morning, Mr. Khair. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Teripa, Mr. Khair.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Apa kabar?
Alhamdulillah ketemu lagi.
Alhamdulillah. Masih sedang nunggu lagi ya?
Tunggu lagi. Nanti jam 8.45 mulai.
Oke, insya Allah boleh.
Standby.
voice over sampai si ini kan sama tapi ini dulu welcome sampai shortly aja. Oh oke. Tapi beberapa kali 2 kali aja. Tenggo.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen who have joined us in online session. We would like to inform that 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum Mass 2021 will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen who have joined us in online session, we would like to inform that 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum Mass 2021 will begin shortly. Thank you.
slash. Apa itu? Oh ya. Mic 1 belum di-mute. Mic 1.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen who have joined us in online session. We would like to inform that 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum MES 2021 will begin shortly. Allow me to announce several rules to improve our conference quality. First, we encourage our online participants to use the virtual background that has been prepared by the committee in the chatting column. Second, we recommend you to keep the video camera on during the session, and also please turn off the audio during the presentation. Third, please use Zoom name with the format. For all management of MES, pp/pw/pd/pwk MES_name of participants atau nama peserta. For invitation and other participant, name of your institution _name of participants. And also, ladies and gentlemen, in the spirit of COVID-19 prevention, let me remind you again to keep performing the health protocols in the public area. First, always use your face mask. Use your hand sanitizer. Keep your social distance. Keep your mobility and interaction. And avoid yourself from the crowd. We would like also to inform you that all crews and offline guests have been tested the PCR or antigen test with the negative results. This is to ensure the implementation of health protocol in our event venues. Ladies and gentlemen, please be ready. Our main agenda will be started shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are about to begin the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum 2021 organized by the Central Board of MES, we would like to seek you to be able to attend this event with an orderly manner so that this event can take place well and smoothly. Thank you. The Honorable Vice Chairman 3 of MES, Minister of Investment, Chairman of Indonesia Investment Coordinating Board, Mr. Bahlil Lahadalia. The speakers who will deliver the material, namely, Member of the Expert Board of MES, Director of Durham Center for Islamic Economics and Finance, Professor Mehmet Asutai. Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the People's Republic of China and Mongolia, His Excellency Dr. Andes Jauhari Oratmangun. Chairman of MES Singapore, Muhammad Khair Muhammad Nur. Central Management of MES, Bapak Dripa Syabana. All General Chairman of Regional Administrators, Special Regional Administrators, and Regional Administrators of MES. And all participants of 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum MES 2021. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and best wishes for all of us. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Praise be to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, who has bestowed all His gifts and favors on us. So today we are able to attend the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum 2021, which is an annual event of MES as a series event for the National World Gathering 2021 of MES. Today's event will have the theme, Enhancing Sustainable Community Empowerment Through Islamic Finance and Impact Investment. We would like to thank the administrators of MES, both central, regional and special areas, the invitees, and all attendees who have taken the time to attend the Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum today. Ladies and gentlemen, for that, let's start this good event by reciting Basmalah. Hopefully, this event can provide benefits to continue to encourage the acceleration of economic growth and Islamic finance in Indonesia. Let's say together, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to the reading of the Holy Quran, Surah Ali Imran, verse 103, which will be read by Ustadz Ahmad Firdaus, MA, the first winner of MTQ Riau.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا. واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون. كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون. صدق الله العظيم. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Ustadz Ahmad Firdaus MA, as the national Qori. Hopefully, through reading the Holy Quran, it will add to the blessings and smoothness of our event today. Ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to the keynote speech that will open our event. the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum, which will be delivered by Vice Chairmanry of MES. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Bahlil Lahadalia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Yang saya hormati Bapak Haji Erick Thohir sebagai Ketua Umum Masyarakat Ekonomi Syariah, Ketua Umum saya. Yang saya hormati Pak Gubernur BI, Bapak Peri Warjio, dan Bapak Sekjen Masyarakat Ekonomi Syariah, Bapak Igi, dan Bapak Ibu semua yang mohon maaf saya tidak sebutkan satu persatu. Kalau kita bicara tentang ekonomi syariah, ini kita berbicara salah satu di antaranya instrumennya lebih banyak didorong oleh UMKM. Menurut data BPS, 99,9% unit usaha itu ada pada UMKM, yang jumlahnya kurang lebih sekitar 64 juta. Dalam konteks itu, kontribusi UMKM terhadap PDB itu sebesar 60%. Tidak hanya di situ. Kontribusi tenaga kerja UMKM dari total tenaga kerja yang ada di negara kita 131 juta, 131 juta, itu UMKM sekitar 120 juta. Kalau kita mau bedah lagi lebih dalam, yang sangat disayangkan adalah kredit lending. Kredit lending yang ke UMKM itu tidak lebih dari 18%. Data 2020 menggambarkan bahwa kredit lending kita kurang lebih sekitar 6.000 triliun. 300 triliun kredit keluar, 5.700 di dalam negeri. Di mana UMKM-nya itu hanya 1.127 triliun sekian. Pandangan kami, UMKM adalah pondasi ekonomi nasional yang sudah teruji. Kenapa kami katakan sudah teruji? Krisis tahun 98, ketika inflasi ekonomi kita 88%, cadangan devisa kita 17 miliar US dollar, dan defisit ekonomi kita 13%. Di saat bersamaan, yang menjadi tulang punggung pertahanan ekonomi nasional kita adalah UMKM. Hampir semua perusahaan-perusahaan besar itu mempeletkan diri, bahkan mungkin keluar. Atas dasar itu kemudian tidak perlu kita ragukan kesetiaan dan kontribusi UMKM yang hampir kebanyakan itu adalah, saya punya keyakinan mereka adalah yang beragama Muslim dan bisa menjalankan ekonomi syariah. Problemnya satu adalah, pertama, hampir 40% UMKM kita itu bukan UMKM formal. Inilah yang menjadi harus kita lakukan. Kita harus formalkan. Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja ini sudah kita sahkan, dan seluruh perizinan UMKM itu gratis via OSS. Selama UMKM-nya itu tidak memiliki klasifikasi KBLI risiko yang tinggi. Kalau risiko menengah ke bawah itu bisa langsung dapat sertifikat halal, juga langsung bisa dapat, termasuk SNI. Kaitan dengan itu, saya pikir Kementerian Investasi berkomitmen untuk dua hal. Yang pertama adalah mendorong agar yang belum formal kita formalkan, supaya pelaku-pelaku UMKM ini bisa mendapatkan akses perbankan. Kalau mereka sudah diformalkan, maka bisa kita tingkatkan kredit lending dari 18% itu menjadi 30%. Ini kami mohon arahan dari Pak Ketua kami, Pak Erik. Ini kalau kita bicara tentang keadilan. Yang kedua, di dalam Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja pasal 90 yang kami sudah lakukan inisiasi dan sudah berjalan programnya, setiap pengusaha yang melakukan investasi di Indonesia, baik itu dari foreign direct investment atau PMDN, itu wajib berkolaborasi dengan UMKM. Kenapa wajib? UMKM harus jadikan sebagai subjek dan objek pembangunan di mana investasi itu berada. Kami sudah mempunyai permen itu. Atas perintah Pak Erik, kita harus mampu memberikan ruang yang cukup untuk pertumbuhan ekonomi itu yang merata. Karena pertumbuhan ekonomi kita baik, tapi kalau tidak ada pemerataan pertumbuhan, itu juga akan menjadi masalah. Kita tidak ingin Gini rasio kita tinggi. Sementara UMKM itu ada pada pusat-pusat pedesaan, pusat-pusat kecamatan, dan pusat-pusat kabupaten. Yang mereka itu sebenarnya ada dari Sabang sampai Merauke. Dengan demikian, harapan saya, izinnya kita formalkan, kita kasih UMKM, kreditnya kita kasih, kolaborasi akses pasarnya kita bangun, maka ke depan saya pikir sistem ekonomi syariah ini akan menjadi salah satu terbesar di dunia dan Indonesia akan menjadi salah satu pemain utamanya. Demikian, terima kasih. Kurang lebihnya mohon maaf. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua.
Thank you very much to Mr. Bahlil Lahadalia for officially opening the event today. Ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to the reading of the prayer that will be read by Mr. Dr. Buhari Muslim. Please welcome Mr. Dr. Buhari Muslim.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الحمد يحيي ويميت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير نستغفر الله العظيم ونتوب إليه بسم الله ما شاء الله لا يسوق الخير إلا الله بسم الله ما شاء الله لا يصرف السوء إلا الله بسم الله ما شاء الله ما كان من نعمة فمن الله بسم الله ما شاء الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله اللهم لك الحمد وإليك المستكى وأنت المستعان ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه بعدد أنواع الرزق والفتوحات يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث اللهم أصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين أبدا اللهم يا مدبر الليل والنهار ويا محول الأحوال حول أحوالنا وأحوال بلادنا إلى أحسن الحال بحولك وقوتك يا عزيز يا متعال حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا وأكرمنا ولا توهنا وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا اللهم أنت الغني الحميد أغثنا 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 وأغث بلادنا اللهم اسقنا واسقي بلادنا بالغيث النافع يا غني يا حميد يا ذا الجلال والإكرام اللهم ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا ربنا أتمم لنا نورنا واغفر لنا إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم لك الحمد شكرا ولك المن فضلا وأنت ربنا حقا ونحن عبيدك رقا وأنت لم تزل لذلك أهلا اللهم يا ميسر كل عسير فقير ويا جابر كل كسير ويا صاحب كل فريد ويا مقوي كل ضعيف ويا مغني كل فقير ويا مأمن كل مخيف يسر علينا كل عسير فتيسر العسير عليك يسير اللهم يا من لا يحتاج إلى البيان والتفسير حاجاتنا إليك كثير وأنت عليم بها وبصير اللهم إنا نخاف منك ونخاف ممن يخاف منك ونخاف ممن لا يخاف منك بحق من يخاف منك نجنا ممن لا يخاف منك بحق سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم احرسنا بعينك التي لا تنام واكنفنا بكنفك الذي لا يرام وارحمنا بقدرتك علينا أنت رجاؤنا فلا تهلكنا يا أرحم الراحمين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much to Mr. Dr. Buhari Muslim. Hopefully, through reading the prayers, all hopes and targets that we have planned will be given ease and success. Amin, ya Rabbal Alamin. Ladies and gentlemen, let's watch the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum with the theme Enhancing Sustainable Community Empowerment Through Islamic Finance and Impact Investment. The speakers who will deliver the material, namely, Member of the Expert Board of MES, Director of Durham Center for Islamic Economics and Finance, Professor Mehmet Asutai. Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the People's Republic of China and Mongolia, His Excellency Dr. Andes Jauhari Oratmangun. Chairman of MES Singapore, Muhammad Khair Mohammed Nur. And the moderator of the event, namely Mr. Dripa Shabana. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Dripa Shabana.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and best wishes for all of us. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Praise be to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala who has bestowed all His gifts and favor on us. So today, we are able to attend the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum 2021, which is an annual event of MES, as part of series of events for the National Work Gathering 2021 of MES. Our theme for today's event is Enhancing Sustainable Community Empowerment Through Islamic Finance and Impact Investment. Ladies and gentlemen, the scale and ambition of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as embodied in the 17 SDGs, call for substantial financial and technical resources. These sums are far beyond the scope of the individual governments and the multilateral funding agencies to supply. Private sector funding, capabilities, and know-how need to be mobilized to sustain the new development agenda and the global partnership for sustainable development to operationalize the policies and actions and end poverty within a generation. Impact investment, defined as a deployment of funds with the aim to generate social and environmental impact as well as financial return, has established itself as an important source of funding for the SDGs. Its global reach is growing rapidly. The Islamic finance sector, meanwhile, has grown from a market of 200 billion US dollar in 2003 and is expected to reach 2.7 trillion US dollar in 2031. This represents a strong potential source of financing for the SDGs, fostering development and helping to end poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me introduce myself. My name is Dripa Syabana. I'll be the moderator for today's conference, and I will do my best to generate fruitful discussion so we can benefit from optimum results. The presentation and the Q&A will be structured as following. The first 60 minutes will be utilized by 3 of our distinguished speakers with a presentation maximum of 20 minutes for each speaker. The next 30 minutes will be used for Q&A segments. The following 9 minutes after that will be an opportunity for our speakers to make their closing statement of 3 minutes for each speaker. Before we welcome our distinguished speakers today, I would like to remind all of us that the speakers are expecting to address the following issue. First, opportunities and challenges in developing impact investment. Second, how to measure the success of impact investment. Third, how to enlarge the area of overlap between the Islamic finance and impact investment and to develop collaborative strategies between them. Fourth, potential development of Islamic finance and impact investment in the context of sustainable community empowerment. Let's begin the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum today with the theme Enhancing Sustainable Community Empowerment through Islamic Finance and Impact Investment. Our first speaker who will be presenting is a member of the expert board of MES, Director of Durham Center for Islamic Economics and Finance, Professor Mehmet Asutai. Please welcome Professor Mehmet. You have 20 minutes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's good to be here. Thank you very much for the introduction, Mr. Chairman. His Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. I could see some of our former students as well in the audience. It's good to be here. It's good to be part of the MES. We have always enjoyed also hosting MES UK conferences at Durham University. It's always a pleasure to attend any event hosted in Indonesia or online with the Indonesian colleagues. And also thank you for choosing such a topic in relation to empowerment. Empowerment is very much part of my Islamic moral economy discourse. And I consider finance has the objective, or finance must have the objective to contribute to empowerment. And therefore, financial inclusion debate is important. However, if financial inclusion cannot deliver empowerment, then it remains only bank accounts and the debted individuals. However, we have to go through that process, reach to that empowerment, because that's the whole objective of Islamic economics. Again, it's a great pleasure to be here. So I'll try to discuss the whole idea of Islamic moral economy, and also looking at the whole impact investment and in relation to Islamic economics. Time is very short, and I have plenty to say. But let's start. Let's see how much I can go. This picture perhaps summarizes what we want to say, to be honest. Most of us, unfortunately, the reality is in the negative. Of course, with the equality, we might be able to achieve something, but it doesn't solve the problem. And therefore the importance of equity. In other words, the empowerment. Empowering the one who doesn't have enough to come to a certain level so that the accessibility can be possible. However, these are all from social media. The objective is to go beyond that, to provide accessibilities, the empowerment, because empowerment relates to accessibility. So by doing equality, of course, sometimes it may not be possible to reach empowerment, but equity gives us an opportunity to establish or give that chance for empowerment, so that people who have lesser can have the accessibility to resources. But what is important is on the right-hand side, the justice part, so that we can remove the barriers. And that's the important part of the discourse of Islamic economics. So inequity, how we can respond to inequity. And that is very much the discourse of Islamic economics. And therefore, we have to look into how the barriers can be removed, emancipation and empowerment. Because with equity, we can reach to empowerment, but emancipation should happen as well, so that the resources that has been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be accessible by individuals. Hence, emancipation and empowerment is an important part of the discourse of Islamic economics. Now, however, when we look at, of course, a global scenery, finance now is considered to be the main source to achieve all this. But when we look at the nature of finance, unfortunately, the huge financialization that we have in the world entirely fictitious, and therefore, in reality, there isn't finance available for emancipation and empowerment of individuals. And because whatever we have around us, as we can see in comparison, the global GDP and the total assets of the global financial institutions in the world, entire fictitiousness. And again, Islamic economics and finance aims at overcoming that fictitiousness to establish that real economy and embeddedness into real economy and the value system, so that the emancipation and empowerment can happen. Again, when we look at, for instance, the GDP per capita growth over since 1960s, again, we see a domination. Somehow, as we can see, the dominant countries, mainly the Western countries, have much larger, and those are the countries throughout the history transferred the resources from the other parts of the world to their own, and therefore we can see that continuous trend of GDP per capita growth much higher than the countries which suffered with colonization or political domination by the West. Unfortunately, they are not doing. Again, the emancipation issues is prevented in the process. And looking at, of course, an important aspect of the emancipation is the whole sustainability discourse, the environmental issues that we have. In a recent report published by UNDP, for instance, in the beginning of 2020, during COVID period, a survey resulted, and which with a large number of people, 1.2 million people pulled from 50 countries, 64% of the participants claimed that or declared that the climate change is an emergency. So another problem for us, a product of, again, modernization, a product of not recognizing the right of the stakeholders. Again, the Islamic response, we consider whatever we have around us as a privilege, and it's an amana, is a trust, and environment is one of those, of course. Again, looking at the carbon emission issues with the commodification of environment, carbon emissions since 1850, as you can see, United States is the main polluters. As you can see, Indonesia is somewhere there as well. As you can see in the pictures, I thought it was somewhere there. Yes, it is the, unfortunately, Indonesia is a big polluter as well, as you can see. And since 2019, again, Indonesia, it is still in the list in the first 10 as a polluters. And these are realities that we have. And unfortunately, the modes of production, the way we organize the production and hence the consumption has resulted in such catastrophes. Growth, everyone is encouraged to grow, but towards what objective? What is the objective of? What is that empowerment and emancipation? But it's the part of that growth objective, this linear growth that every year, every company has to grow with certain, but what is the implication for resources? Again, that brings us the whole social impact areas, the emancipation and empowerment, because whether the resources in the world we have can sustain such a growth, which we know that now with the environmental problem around us, the social problems, poverty, and etc. No, it's not possible for us to continue with such growth. But also look at the consumption behavior of individuals in this modern era. Look at the impact of birds on a beautiful beach, look at the turtles, and look at the human footprints on the earth. And again, that Islamic moral economy, Islamic economics would suggest to us that in our consumption as well, we have to respect the other resources around us. We have to be humble in our style. So looking at all this, what it tells us that the financialization that we have been witnessing since 1980s, unfortunately created such an opportunity space to reach out credit and resulted in such consequences, and finance have been commodifying everything in front of it and resulting in such disequilibrium, challenging the existing equilibrium. For us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world with an equilibrium. So the production systems that we have developed, mainly under the Western worldview, as well as the consumption patterns, unfortunately resulted in increased inequality, inequity, climate and environmental challenges, poverty, etc. These are the problems that we are facing. And when we look at the OIC countries, of course, in terms of sustainability index, we see that most of the countries in the middle region, only Kyrgyz Republic green, it is in the first 50, is doing well, but the rest of the countries, I think Indonesia, it is in the blue, so it is in the middle ranked 77. And the rest of the countries, unfortunately, it is in the yellowish area. So it is on the lower part. So in terms of sustainability, how we can therefore utilize Islamic finance to ensure that empowerment and sustainability is working together. When we look at, again, the state of sustainable development goals in the OIC countries in relation to economic growth, you should be able to see Indonesia, again, is this is 2020 data. Indonesia is just about 4% economic growth with the SDG index score. So it is somewhere in the middle-ish. Most of the Muslim countries are doing, OIC member countries are doing well in relation to that, but there's a huge need for financing a green economy, a sustainable economy. Again, when we look at human capital index, unfortunately, that is where the social impact is very much needed to push for the development of human capital that we have. I do not want to use the word human capital as capital for human, but unfortunately that's the language that is used. But the development of human as an important factor for us, there's a huge need to develop. Again, when we look at, I'm referring to Indonesia, not only this program is Indonesian in Indonesia, but Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in terms of economy, part of G20. And therefore, as we can see again, Indonesia 87, Turkey is the second largest OIC economy with 53, and Saudi Arabia is the third largest economy in the OIC, 73. So that shows that the challenge that we have in front of us in terms of developing. Again, when we look at Human Development Index, similar results, perhaps Saudi Arabia now in a better position, but Turkey, it is in the high human development. And then you have, of course, lower development countries. Indonesia is the largest economy. Unfortunately, it is even below. So these are the challenges that we have in front of us. But what is the objective of finance then? That's an important question for us that we have to understand. It is just an intermediary. It is not an entity to create wealth in itself. It is an intermediary. And therefore the financing and financialization, financial and financing is different. Islam therefore refers to financing economic activities rather than creating financialization, because financialization is for the sake of finance. Financialization is just for the sake of creating financial wealth. However, for us, it has to be an intermediary. And that is very much articulated in the writing of Schiller, for instance, as well as Umar Chapra. Schiller is the Nobel Prize winner. As we can see in his description, what is finance? It is not making money per se. It's a function. It is a functional in relation to what? To support other goals. What those goals are? So the goals of the society. And therefore, he suggests that the better aligned a society's financial institutions with its goals and ideals, the stronger and the more successful the society will be. In other words, finance has to be embedded into the value system of a particular society, so that it can produce some positive outcomes for us in the process. So looking at, therefore, what is the whole Islamic understanding here? One, of course, justice. Justice is essential for us. But when justice is the essential part of the whole Quranic criteria. But however, when justice is not enough, ihsan is the establishing equilibrium in the society. And therefore, those who are in a better position, helping the others, bringing to the same level, not only individuals, environment, society, and etc. And that has to be sustainable, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world within a mizan, and balance and order, and that order has to be sustained. Again, ihsan is a process in establishing that equilibrium towards that mizan, that order, that balance. And hence the imperative. What is imperative? Islah, the reform. When we depart from the mizan, from the balance, always our objective is to bring it back to the original position as much as we could. Hence, the whole sustainability discourse for us embedded within the Islamic understanding. So it is the justice, sustainable, and the Islah as an imperative is important. And for us, therefore, search for meanings. Islamic finance, of course, is one of those, but going beyond that with the problems that we are facing, how we can mobilize Islamic finance within this Islamic moral economy to produce certain outcomes, the empowerment, the emancipation, because that's the moral economy's aim, how to emancipate individuals from debtness, from poverty, to reach into empowered so that they can become people who can give zakat now. So empowerment process and emancipating from debtness, emancipating from poverty, for instance. So therefore, Islamic economic development has to move forward such objectives, such consequences to Islamic finance, so that we can work within the balance and equilibrium through ihsan by defining what is human in a particular way. Islam defines human in a particular way as the objective function of human being falah, reaching falah in this world and in hereafter, through how much ihsan we can do in the process. And therefore, when we look at the whole transformation of the world from moral economy to neoliberal economies, extensive and expansive capitalism that we are facing, and OIC member countries are suffering with the same self-regulated market economy, very much dominant, and a linear growth imposed through the world order, and in recent years as a response, as a global morality. Initially, we had the Millennium Development Goals. Now we have the Sustainable Development Goals. But the initial equation is not questioned in terms of emancipating and empowering individual. We are saying that, look, these consequences, environmental consequence happens. So how we can overcome the consequence? But the question is, why do we have environmental problem? The sources of those problems. Poverty, yes, we have poverty, but what are the sources of that poverty? So those questions are not asked. On the one hand, of course, the emergence of SDGs in terms of a global morality is a positive development. On the other hand, it doesn't go to the root of the problem, just moderate the consequences of the problems that we are having. Therefore, the Islamic response, however, in the Islamic response, the emergence is highly important for us because it has a particular worldview. But with Islamic finance, we can see that it is becoming more financialized, more capital oriented within this Weberian problem of whether Islam and capitalism can work, as the Rodinson articulated that can be possible. However, our objective is to this sunny equilibrium society, emancipation and empowerment. And I love the way you Indonesian people are defining Islamic economics as Rahmatul Alamin, how we can reach to that Rahmatul Alamin for all the stakeholders in the process. And therefore, the emergence of Islamic moral economy as a human-centric, stakeholder-centric, as opposed to shareholder-centric understanding of a governance system, considering as a counter-hegemony, making an alternative, developing an alternative ways of responding to the problems that we have in front of us. And therefore rescuing human, rescuing land, rescuing environment, rescuing labor, even rescuing capital. That has been the objective of Islamic economics for us. And therefore, the whole definitional issues, the whole worldview is important for us because Islamic worldview will consider the everything that we have around us is a privilege. It's a privilege for us, and therefore it is our responsibility. It is the Quranic verse that we are witness unto mankind as well as all the other stakeholders around us, and therefore the privilege, it comes with a responsibility. What is that responsibility? When something is an amana to you, it is your responsibility to look after. And therefore Islamic ontology would perceive whatever we have around us is a privilege, including environment, including other people and their welfare and their well-being, well-being of humans, well-being of animals, well-being of environment and others within that privilege ontology, rather than the right ontology of the classical economics or capitalism. And hence the distinction, because as we mentioned, the Islamic ontology starts with mizan, the development ontology. Everything is based on this mizan, this balance, this equilibrium, and any departure from equilibrium result in poverty, environmental crisis, social crisis, economic crisis, human rights problems, and etc. So therefore, disruption from the mizan results in such problem. Our objective, of course, Islamic economics would consider through ihsan how to bring it back to the original through Islah process and to reaching perfection. And therefore, when we look at the definition of Islamic economics, either establishing justice or overcoming injustice in the society. When we look at all the definitions since 1970s, 60s, and 70s, this is very much the definition put forward. It is not the efficiency of resources, but it is establishing justice in the society or preventing injustice in the society and defining human objective function falah through ihsan. And these are important, has important consequence for us because the whole iqtisad world, instead of economics, because economics by definition is efficiency oriented, maximization oriented. However, when we look at the iqtisad as a concept, is an Arabic, when we look at the roots of it, qasd and the qasd, we see just share, justice, directing towards an objective, giving the right of everything, giving the right of all humans, giving the right of environment, giving the right of all the stakeholders to locate everything in its place. And therefore, it is very much falah-seeking individual through ihsan society, emancipation, empowerment, stakeholding development, and embeddedness. And therefore, as we can see, we have amazing worldview here through which we should be able to develop our institutions, because Tawheed directly tells us that every stakeholder, including human, everything complements each other to reach unity. And therefore justice is essential, how ihsan can create the equilibrium. Growth is important, but growth cannot be at the expense of others, Tazkiyah tells us. Rububiyyah tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything and everyone with a potential to develop, and that cannot be prevented. So Maqasid al-Sharia again, and again Amana, everything that we have around us is a privilege. Maqasid Sharia tells us that our objective, whatever we do, has to produce some positive outcomes towards the well-being of all the stakeholders. And hence, therefore, what we see here, Mizan and Ihsan and Justice Adala between them.
1 minute.
Yep. Oh gosh, that's terribly difficult. And therefore, is looking at riba, the whole objective of riba to prevent expropriation, okay, the rights of the others. And zakat, however, in the same way, when people are excluded from the resources that has been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bringing back so that people can have access to that. The right of the society when they are denied because of the private production of the resources created by Allah, zakat compensate for that, again overcomes the expropriation. So time is an issue, we understand, and just to tell us that therefore every stakeholder has to be recognized in our production function to create the positive impact, and rather than just capital and labor, but all the stakeholders in the Islamic production function and their rights, they have to their rights have to be represented in the equation. Time already finished, but I just want to say a few things on the perhaps just passing through, just coming to the whole idea of what we have today in front of us. So therefore, when we look at the emergence of Islamic economics and finance, very much it started with a social credit union. It started with a Tabul Haji, Midcam, and etc. Of course, in Malaysia, Indonesia, BMTs. In the second stage, we had the Islamic commercial banks. Then in the third stage, we had the capital markets, financial markets, and money markets since this beginning of this century. And now it is time to go back to the basics, to look into the new turn, new institutionalization has to look into the back to basics, look at sustainability, social impact, green finance, and etc. So these are important for us to look into. Time is an issue, but just one thing as well, I'll finish with this. Of course, the whole intersection between ESGs and responsible finance and Islamic finance quadrum. But just to finish with this one, so when we look at the decision making within the Islamic finance, what we see, most of the things that you know, the left-hand side, most of the areas, the Sharia sources, the prohibitions, the expectation from Islamic finance. But what is missing is the green areas on the right-hand side, the moral screening process, and the outcomes that we expect from that. In other words, Islamic finance is only operating within the negative screens because the market logic necessitates that. However, we have to go beyond market logic to come to the Islamic logic. In order to go to Islamic logic, therefore, the importance of maqasid, but time is an issue. So you need to have negative screens that is happening with the Sharia compliance that we have, but the positive screen, what are those? The maqasid al-Sharia consequences. What is their emancipation, empowerment of human and other stakeholders, sustainable development, social impact, responsible green investment. So such consequences have to be considered as part of the equation of Islamic finance in order for Islamic finance to reach the objective of Islamic economics. Otherwise, unfortunately, we will end up with the same thing as the conventional finance is doing, which we can see is happening around us. Most of the investment or the financing from Islamic finance is going to financial sectors, and most of the, when we look at the sectoral financing, again, it goes to sectors which are not necessarily creating value added, financial sectors and the consumption durable expenses. And when we look at the financing nature, again, we see that heavily on the side of debt-based products, and hence debt is increasing in the society, and that prevents, of course, emancipation. Debt is an emancipation issue. When you have debt, you cannot emancipate, and therefore you cannot move into empowerment. There are plenty of issues to discuss, but I'll stop here just to suggest that Maqasid al-Sharia framework we can utilize to create this impact Of course, everyone in Islamic finance refers to Maqasid al-Sharia, but not in terms of instrumentalized sense, but it is an essential criteria as an embedded reality that the Maqasid al-Sharia has to be considered within the process, rather than just a lip service saying that whatever we do is a Maqasid al-Sharia. No, the consequences, it has to be consequences of the Islamic finance has to be Islamically acceptable, and therefore form versus the substance, and both is necessary, form is necessary, but substance, the consequences are necessary so that we can discuss that whether we have achieved to evaluate whether we have achieved the objectives of Islamic economics and developed a, socially acceptable outcomes within the Islamic norms and terminology. My apologies for going over, and thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mehmet, for your comprehensive and awesome presentation. Huge knowledge for us. Many complex things structured in a clear logic and make us easier to understand it. I'm sure there will be an interesting discussion during our Q&A, and you may add some point or slide at that segment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, who will be presenting, is Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the People Republic of China and Mongolia, His Excellency Dr. Andes Johari Oratmangun. You still mute, His Excellency, sorry. The next 20 minutes is yours, His Excellency.
All right, thank you very much, Pak Dripasya Bana, Professor Mehmet Asutai. Thank you for a very clear and interesting presentation. Even I myself learned a lot from your presentation, and I would love to have your PPT because I would like to explore further. Mr. Muhammad Karbin Muhammad Nur, looking forward to listening to your presentation as well. I'm not an expert on economic Sharia, but what I'm going to make a presentation today is about the bilateral relations between Indonesia and China. And at the same time, I would like to elaborate further how China has worked to realize its sustainable development goals, SDGs. In fact, I was chairing one of the subcommittee on the MDGs and SDGs during my stay in New York when I was there as a diplomat serving our mission there. And then how China made a big success in poverty alleviation. This is one thing that we could learn from them as well. And how China supports its SMEs to enhance its domestic economic growth, as mentioned by our Minister for Investment, my dear friend, Mr. Bahlil Lahadalia. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me elaborate further about the bilateral relations between Indonesia and China. Indonesia and China became comprehensive strategic partnerships since 2013. We established our bilateral relations back in the April 30, 1950. So we are celebrating 71st year anniversary. And then in 2005, we became the strategic partnerships. So we elevate the relationships. And then for me, as ambassador to China, the elevation of the relationship should be reflected in the number. So since 2018, the two countries have also synergized our development programs through cooperation between China's Belt and Road Initiative, initiated by President Xi Jinping, and Indonesia Global Maritime Forum, initiated by our President, President Joko Widodo. So this is the number from the 2020. Our trade relations, volume of trade, reached $78.37 billion. So our biggest trading partner. Indonesia ranked number 4th for the China's biggest ASEAN trading partner, while China has been constantly Indonesia second investor. Last year, 4.4 billion US dollar, 4.8 billion US dollar, while Hong Kong, 3.7 billion US dollar. So if we add both, it's already surpassed 8 billion US dollar. This is the realization of the investment. And from January to September, because we just received the number from China Customs, our trade already reached, volume of trade already reached 85.4 billion US dollar. Hopefully, I still cross my finger for that. We will reach 100 billion US dollar by the end of this year. And in fact, this is the target for the 2024. So let's see, hopefully we'll reach our target. And then for the investment just released by our Minister for Investment, Mr. Bahlil Lahadalia, the realization of the investment from China already surpassed 2.3 billion US dollar, and from Hong Kong, 2.7 billion US dollar. So this is from China and Hong Kong. And of course, within the context of the China's efforts to fight for poverty eradication, SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals, has been put into the China's national goals during the 14th five-year plan officially endorsed by National People Congress March this year. In connection to the SDGs, China is in the endless endeavor to eradicate poverty. And then in 2015, Chinese government has spent more than 80 billion US dollar to end the poverty, where there are 3 points there. The government has relocated millions of households from remote rural regions to new villages, and then creating more suitable for economic development and constructing new roads, houses, and other infrastructure projects. So the results is more than 700 million Chinese already came out from the poverty. So earlier this year, Chinese government released the white paper on poverty alleviation, describing China's experience and contribution in eradicating its poverty rates. The white paper records that China's efforts of eliminating extreme poverty, comprehensively introducing China's exploration and practice of poverty reduction, and sharing China's way of poverty reduction. From the white paper, China announced that at the end of the 2020, the country has achieved the goal of eliminating extreme poverty, where the 98.99 million people in rural areas who were living below the current poverty threshold all had escaped from poverty. So this is the big achievement from China. So as an ambassador here, I have learned that the effort to shake off poverty reflects a number of essential measures the government had taken as follows. Maybe we could emulate these efforts or this policy as well. First, the government constantly maintaining the harmonious synergy between the government and non-governmental sides in development. Under the synergy, the government assists and encourages business institutions, and in particular SMEs, to operate more in order to strengthen domestic economy. Second, the government has been focusing on development in regions where the poverty rate were higher, such as building infrastructure and connectivity to the remote and rural areas in order to encourage business and economic activities in those regions. Sounds similar to our policy as well. The focused development succeeded to drop number of the poor, amounting of 15.6 million persons in the 5 autonomous regions. And third, Chinese government has succeeded to maintain stability and security, especially in the regions which create the strong driving force for a government to implement its program to alleviate poverty. Now let me allude a little bit about the SMEs, how the government support the SMEs. Besides the government's effort to eradicate poverty, the government also works hard to encourage and support the development of its SMEs. Here in China, they have more than 50 million SMEs. So SMEs, like what's been said by our minister, have significant role in poverty reduction by opening many job vacancies. In the sense that since economic reform back in 1978, SMEs has become one of the driving force in the economy and an important impetus to the economic development in China. And then, of course, we witness it as well. Currently, SMEs represent more than 90% of the enterprises in the country. SMEs here contribute over 60% of the GDP and over 70% to the patents and 80% of nationwide jobs in the country. Maybe Professor Mehmet could do some research on this as well, whether it is compatible to the Sharia economic as already presented by you. About the new 5 million SMEs emerge yearly, representing at least 10% year-on-year growth rate. In 2020, the number of SMEs in China grew to 43 million SMEs. And then I've been working here for 3 years. I witnessed some of the development as well. Some policies are very friendly to the SMEs here. So looking into the significance of the SMEs in China's economy, the government provided continuous full support to the SMEs as follows. First, encourage the digital transformation within the SMEs economic activities. I think Indonesia is going in that direction as well. To stipulate policies and regulations to protect SMEs products in their domestic market and encourage SMEs to export their products, quite similar to us as well. Send a central government staff to provide grassroots support. We've been doing that for quite some time. Issue several policies in the form of liquidity injections, cutting interest rates, cutting rent costs, delaying payment of social security payments, reducing house rental costs, reducing taxes and expenses, preventing layoff, and relaxing property sector policies. I think some of the issues has been alluded by Minister of Investment. And then one is quite buzzword now is the dual circulation policy. So apart from the government's direct support to the development of the SMEs, by the end of 2020, the government also launched dual circulation policy, which aims at strengthening domestic markets and economic activities, strengthening local products capacity and quality, and attracting foreign investment to focus on strengthening its domestic market and products and boosting export, and then reducing the dependency on foreign imported products. So it's quite similar to us as well. So distinguished guests, dear speakers, Professor Mehmet and Mr. Muhammad Khair and moderator, what will be the potential cooperation between Indonesia and China in the future? Of course, number one is foreign trade. Is still a key player underpinning the China's economic resilience. So in spite of the ongoing pandemic, China customs data shows that China's imports and exports managed to sustain positive growth for 15 consecutive months. So the World Bank already projected that China's economy will grow by 8 to 8.5% in 2021. Of course, increasing 0.4 points from the April projections. So we received the benefit looking at the increase of the Indonesian export to China, because from January till September, our export to China increased by 52%. And the other thing is green economy. On green economy, China and Indonesia have the same aspiration to reduce the use of fossil fuel. In this slide, having the same aspirations and needs, both China and Indonesia have the potential to complement each other and work together to achieve their green energy goals. This is in line with as well with the Sustainable Development Goals. And number 2 is health infrastructure. So this is within the context of the health cooperation, lesson learned from pandemic. So China and Indonesia have been working together since the outbreak of the pandemic last year. And then, of course, much has been established between China and Indonesia, looking at the COVID vaccine cooperation. I involved in that negotiation as well, and other medical devices cooperation. And number 3 is on the digitalization. Indonesia, as the 6th largest internet user, it's experiencing digital transformation as well. The contribution of the digital economy to our economy last year, $44.4 billion US dollar. And we are being predicted that by 2025, the valuation of the economic digitalization will be 130 to 150 billion US dollar. It's around 10 to 11% of our GDP. That's the reason why the policy of the government now to support the digitalization of the SMEs as well. Of course, within that context, that Indonesia has established a number of cooperation in digital sector with other countries to include China, which is one of the world's biggest digital player. So in closing, distinguished guests, Pak Dripa, Professor Mehmet, and Mr. Muhammad Khair, ladies and gentlemen, China is home to nearly 1/5 of the world population. Its complete eradication of extreme poverty, the first target of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Looking into the China's success in SDGs achievement, which is poverty reduction and developing SMEs, of course, Indonesia will keep on working together in tandem as well with China and with other countries as well, continuously exploring more future cooperation, especially in boosting economic growth that will relate to poverty eradication, sustainable development, and supporting SMEs. But last but not least, I do hope that the forum will continue productively and beneficially to all of us. Terima kasih. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, His Excellencies Johari Oratmangun, for your presentation that intriguing us about impact investment by China. Maybe the term is different. We need to suggest our opinion from Prof. Mehmet later related to the Islamic finance. We will explore more during the Q&A, His Excellency Johari. For the participant who would like to have questions, please put your name, institution, and question to the Zoom chat box because our committee will select some of the questions. Now we go to the next. Sorry. Our next speaker who will be presenting is the chairman of MES or MES Singapore, Mr. Muhammad Khair Muhammad Nur. Welcome. You have 20 minutes, Mr. Muhammad Khair.
Unshare first.
Stop.
Unshare first.
Ah,
You
okay.
unshare first.
Baik. Ada.
You ready, sir? Mr. Muhammad Khair, are you ready?
Alhamdulillah.
You still mute.
Ya, okay, alhamdulillah. Baik, thank you very much. A'udzubillahi samilani minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'in ala umuri dinina wa din wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. To all my fellow speakers, Professor and also His Excellency, and to the moderator and to all other participants in this webinar. Good morning to you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My discussion today, my sharing today will focus on how the Muslim community in Singapore, being minorities in Singapore, we live in a Muslim minority country, how we actually make use or leverage on some of the Islamic finance tools and asset management approaches to empower the community at large, specifically to the Muslim community at large. So it is very focused on some implementation, some practice that we have actually done for the past many years. As chairman of MES Singapore, I come from the background of doing business consultancy and also halal consultancy, and been pretty active in the community as well, working alongside many NGOs. And as far as Islamic finance is concerned, started to get involved roughly by the end of 1990s, where there was an attempt to actually come up with the Islamic version of Dow Jones Index at that time. I will share with you a little bit more story within this 20 minutes, inshallah. So my presentation will focus, there will be two major parts, or three maybe. One will be just an overview of what's been done in Singapore as far as Islamic finance is concerned, being a non-Muslim country in general, in the midst of having Muslim majority countries like Indonesia itself and also Malaysia, and also we have Brunei at one side of our neighbor there. So I'll just share with you what we have done so far as far as Islamic finance is concerned, inshallah. And I will then focus on giving you some case examples of at least three entities, three items, three entities, three organizations that have actually done pretty successfully, inshallah. Okay, I share you my screen now. Okay, can you all see?
Yes, can.
Okay.
Go on.
We can see it now.
Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So number one, basically, I'm looking at the Singapore situation, the general landscape of Islamic finance in Singapore. We will find that actually, okay, let me just go through very quickly. There is no specific law on Islamic finance actually. The government actually made use of the common regulatory framework to accommodate both conventional conventional and also Islamic conventional banking. Okay, what they do is, as and when products come about, they will do some kind of fine tuning whatsoever. They're pretty open. The government has so far been very friendly to Islamic finance, but of course there are challenges since those times when I actually got involved. When the government was saying that actually, in fact, at that time when I started to be involved, they already opened this thing called Islamic windows, where conventional local banks begin to offer Islamic products at the time. So the Monetary Authority of Singapore is the sole regulator for banking and finance system in Singapore. So it is the one that MES is having similar function with Bank Indonesia itself. It monitors the banking and finance industry in Singapore, whether conventional or Islamic finance. Okay. So some of the very popular components of Islamic banking and finance in Singapore refers mainly to these three: savings account, murabaha, and also sukuk. Sukuk, there's been roughly about 30 over sukuks in Singapore so far. It's been pretty attractive. I've been approached by some banks, example, Maybank Islamic, to actually help promote the use of their financial products and to promote it, especially among the local SMEs, focusing on not just the Muslim SMEs, but also the non-Muslim SMEs. But things have been quite challenging because of the nature of the scope and the market itself, the size of the market itself. Okay. There are other Islamic products in the market. Okay, these are the four generally. I will go through very, very quickly. Later, maybe we can ask during the Q&A. Recently, in 2018, this is something which I was trying to do way back in 1998, 1999. It is actually to come up with an Islamic index at the main board. We work with quite a number of parties. We work with even Bloomberg at that time. I even went to Harvard to meet up with some Islamic finance experts in Harvard, discussing that. I attend some programs. At that time, the message given to me by one of the Islamic finance experts in professor at Harvard, telling me that actually the work that we were trying to do at that time, way back in the 1990s, it was good, but the market in Singapore probably was not ready. And true enough, the market wasn't really ready. He was telling us to actually do a bit more education programs to actually help people become more aware of the Islamic finance and banking itself. But it didn't take off at the time. But the education continues by not only us, by many other friends, companies and parties who actually went on. Later, I will share with you something that has actually evolved after that, culminating to an entity developed by one of our network, inshallah. So now, since 2018, there's this thing called the Singapore Sharia Index, developed by FT Russell. It's actually part of ST, and it covers almost the same criteria. We have a bit more, but generally you can only be classified as Sharia friendly or Sharia compliant when the activities of the company do not include any non-halal activities and the gearing ratio is not more than 1/3 or 30% or 33.3%. Okay, these are some of the examples of companies that are Sharia compliant already on the main board of Singapore. But I think I want to go directly to some case studies where these case studies I picked because having done some work on the ground with the community itself, even working hand in hand with the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore to help the less fortunate, zakat recipients, duafa and that kind of stuff. And having worked with many partners, friends in the community to help empower the community itself. So I thought moving straight into what the Muslim community in Singapore have done so far would be most appropriate to see, to just see as an example how the community is empowered in one way or another through some of the applications of Islamic finance and banking. This is actually done by one company, a subsidiary of the Islamic Religious Council called Waris Investment Private Limited. It is actually created to manage endowment or wakaf and develop even. You'll find actually there are some case examples where creatively they've actually increased the value of wakaf properties in Singapore and also how they manage those wakaf, they are not really productive to make them more productive. I will share with you some of the case examples. So what it is done by Waris. Waris is an acronym called Wakaf Real Estate. Wakaf Real Estate, so short form Waris. Waris in Malay is basically like a beneficiary and also someone who is supposed to take care of, you know, being the party responsible over a certain amanah, inshallah. So I think it carries two meaning there. All right. It is as far as the wakaf portfolio itself, Waris manages the bulk of it is actually mainly property. As you can see, in Singapore, there's this law called the Administration of Muslim Law Act, AMLA. Under AMLA, MUIS is empowered to actually manage wakaf or endowment properties assets in Singapore. So some are managed by the trustees themselves, some are managed by MUIS themselves. Okay. And the total wakaf assets in Singapore as of last year, report 2020, hitting almost $1 billion actually. Okay. And you will find that actually the bulk of the assets managed by MUIS through wakaf would form mainly from properties, and of course there are other forms of financial assets too. All investments managed by waris, they are all Sharia compliant, and they generate total gross annual value of at least about 19 over million. And every year they actually disburse to beneficiaries, which I have the list, I will show you later. This is one way in which through the Islamic Religious Council, and of course empowered by law, the community is empowered. Those in need of help, they are empowered. And when I say in need of help, we are not looking at only families, we are looking at how even NGOs, community organizations, set up leverage to help the community. They are also the beneficiaries of these wakaf investments and the likes, inshallah. So there are two main strategies developed and implemented by waris. One is called wakaf revitalization. The other one is institutional investment initiative. These are very interesting ways in which wakaf are developed and managed in Singapore to fulfill the objective of community empowerment. Just go through, just give you some examples given the constraints of time. This is basically how, one example, a red house is among the, we call it red house in Singapore, is really the property is red in color. And of course, the neighboring sites are not red, but this is the name of the property itself. Under WRS, how red house is actually developed to enhance the property of the value of the wakaf property itself. Okay, this is the first. This is an example. The red house, the one is the first project under WRS. It's very interesting because it's mixed. You'll find that actually, eventually they are maximized to contain 42 residential units and retail units too, bakery. The red house, well known for its bakery business, but it belongs to a wakaf. And so this is actually developed, redefined to increase the value of the wakaf itself, okay, under the wakaf revitalization scheme. And of course, there's another one, the alias villa. This is interesting because the original wakaf consists of dilapidated properties there, and eventually they are being redeveloped. And revenue from the development is projected to be, previously was only in the range of a few $100s. Now we're looking at more than $700,000, and it is to support and maintain a mosque. Okay, the beneficiary refers to the mosque. It's called the Al-Huda Mosque. This is at the high-end area of Singapore, Bukit Timah area. Okay, and of course this is also another interesting part where this is the institutional investment initiative. You'll find very interesting. What waris have done is actually they bought a property, and the funds from the property actually come from those low yielding wakaf. So that eventually the pool amount is used to actually buy this property, and this property is actually then leased out. And it is also generating rental income. This is very interesting because it is also the first Islamic bond in Singapore. Yeah? And we have other examples. This is another interesting one. The Wakaf Bengkulen, very interesting kind of development where eventually from low value, they are being developed into very high value from just 800,000 to more than 71 million in under 10 years. And of course, the beneficiaries also benefited from the redevelopment. You'll find that actually it is formerly it was a Bengkulen mosque. It is there's still a mosque there, redeveloped and then incorporating some commercial space and also a 12-story service apartment. We have another one. This is a popular area among Malay Muslims in Singapore, Juchat, a very popular area. I think you'll find generally in Singapore when Muslim tourists come to Singapore, they will either go to Juchat or Sultan area. So this is one of the areas, okay? Consisting of 2-story, but eventually there's also at the back, they built a 4-story building to expand the whole property. They will conserve on 1st of December. Okay, this is this Hajam Maimuna restaurant, very popular. They actually is actually part of a chain of, now they develop into a chain, not just here in Juchat, but also there's one in Tampines, also at Jalan Sultan area. Okay, this is actually you'll find the beneficiaries are basically as stated. This is how community empowerment is implemented in Singapore through innovative management and development of wakaf properties. Okay, so you'll find the beneficiaries include mosques, madrasas, the poor, the needy, for education and also for burial purposes. And mosque represents the largest beneficiaries of wakaf in Singapore, seriously. And Waris itself also now currently, previously the construction and development of mosque was undertaken by the Housing Development Board of Singapore, but it has been taken over by Waris itself. Just maybe just a sideline. In Singapore, we have this scheme called the Mosque Building Fund, where Muslims in Singapore every month contribute a certain amount of dollars, and the fund collected is actually then used to build mosques in Singapore. So it is almost translating from cash wakaf to eventually creating mosques in Singapore. Granted, mosques under the scheme, they are built on leased land, but there are other mosques in Singapore, about 26 of them, where the origin started off as wakaf mosques. That means mosques developed on wakaf land itself. So very interesting also, as far as the beneficiaries of wakaf in Singapore, interestingly, 26%, they are meant for beneficiaries outside Singapore. Okay, namely Yemen, India, and even Indonesia itself. Why? Because the wakif, they come from these places and they want the benefits of the wakaf to be distributed to where they come from. So comprising again mosques, madrasas, and also poor families of where they come from. There are other wakaf created also in Singapore. We have this popular mosque in Singapore called Masjid Qasim or Qasim. The wakaf Qasim is, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the biggest wakaf in Singapore, and it has benefited the beneficiaries a lot. So the wakaf created to create rental income, and they are actually providing funds to the mosque for maintenance, development, and also to the community itself. Likewise, like Sultan Mosque is the most popular mosque. It is almost like the national mosque in Singapore. They are also operated through wakaf. They are of course other wakaf, so that eventually they support mosques. Example like Masjid Maidin, Masjid Anggola, Masjid Hajjah Fatimah. So these are mosques supported by wakaf. The MBF mosques, they are built, supported by community fund, collected monthly through salaries of Muslims in Singapore, voluntary, is automatically cut. So from the pool, the Islamic Religious Council then begin to build mosques. And currently, the development of such mosques is undertaken by Waris itself. Okay. So this is a summary of the key beneficiaries of Waris. Wakaf Trust, I mentioned just now, mosques, madrasas. Rahmatan Lil Alamani is a foundation under the umbrella of Islamic Religious Council. Again, the beneficiaries, if you want to include even non-Muslims. Yayasan Mendaki is a foundation set up way back in 1980 to help Muslims in Singapore to climb up the education ladder and be independent, be more empowered. This is again, so you'll see that actually community empowerment is actually carried out in Singapore through such foundation. Lembaga Beasiswa Kenang Maulud is actually a trust fund also developed to actually help finance education of needy Muslim students in Singapore. You have Part PM, and also there are other IPC institutions of polytechnic. I was also a member of this little committee by IDB, run in Singapore by Jamia. Jamia Singapore is another NGO doing dakwah in Singapore, and I sat in a committee meant to disburse funds from IDB for Muslim students in Singapore. The fund is actually created to finance, to help students in Muslim minority countries, and we qualify to be Muslim minority countries, so I sit in the board. So we disburse funds to Muslim students in the field of engineering, medicine, mainly these two.
Mr. Khair, 1 minute.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So these are the key beneficiaries of waris. Okay, very quickly also, I have just another example, Pergas Investment Holding. Pergas is almost similar to MUI in Indonesia. It is the Association of Ulama and Religious Teachers. So they have a subsidiary called Pergas Investment Holding. I was actually the pioneering member of the director. At that time, it was called Pergas Co-op. Now it has been changed to Pergas Investment Holding. The whole intent and purpose of Pergas Investment Holding, or at that time Pergas Cooperative, was to ensure that the religious leaders in Singapore, the ulama and the religious teachers, they are supported by their own association to be sustainable in their dakwah work. So these are some, just give you an overview. Even way back in the 70s, Pergas bought property in terms of land, and eventually is upgraded to a row of shop houses again along Yucha Road, and now it has its own building bought at about $30 million and giving rental income to the organization itself. Okay, so about more than 2 million has been recorded since 2008 as far as rental income is concerned, and they have also created this endowment fund where the community can contribute towards a fund, and the fund is actually then managed to actually make it grow bigger. To at the end of the day is to empower the community of religious teachers and ulama to be sustainable, inshallah, in their work of da'wah. Yeah. So this is the third one to share with you. It is actually by atheists. They operate from Singapore. Eventually, they set up offices in Malaysia and also in Indonesia. They actually do Sharia compliant crowdfunding. This is very interesting because they do a lot of work in Indonesia, supporting SMEs in Indonesia too in a lot of projects. Very interesting. Okay, it started out in 2012, but today you will find that actually also help do housing projects in Indonesia. Very interesting stuff. Maybe later we can discuss about it, or maybe we can have another session where they can come on board too. Okay. Other kinds of work that have been done previously, which I don't have the time and space to mention, but I think it's worth to mention because there's also other work done by other organizations, NGOs, like the Kesatuan Guru-Guru Melayu Singapura. This is actually the Association of Malay Teachers, and also we have MPRO. MPRO is a subsidiary of Association of Muslim Professionals. They do have Islamic work done also in Singapore, Islamic finance work, and also there are some other privately run high net worth individuals. They set up their own trust funds based on Islamic principles. Okay, roughly that's what I have today. Some sharing of what we do in Singapore to empower primarily the Muslim community, those in need, through NGOs, organizations, okay, and the work done by Pergas, by Waris, and by MUIS itself to empower the community. So roughly that's what I have. We can ask more questions later, inshallah. Sekian. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad Khair, Muhammad Nur, for sharing Singapore experiences in productive wakaf management for sustainable community development. So many experience we have heard. Now we have another, should be 30 minutes, but I think we only have 25 minutes for the Q&A. I welcome all the speakers to the stage. Now we all, four of us already on the screen. We have some question on the chat board, and on my screen there are 5-6 questions that already selected. And before that, I will ask first to His Excellency Johari Olet Mangun. How much or what is the proportion of China investment to Indonesia as impact investment, if there is? And what is the potential of impact investment from China to Indonesia? Maybe in a short answer, sir. Still mute, sir.
Thank you very much for the questions. In fact, the realization of the investment in Indonesia is conducted by Ministry of Investment. As far as I know, much of the investment coming from China is in the industry such as smelter industry, infrastructures, and then some of the digital transformation or digital company in Indonesia. Those are the investment coming from China to Indonesia. What is the impact? I think maybe if we could have somebody from the Ministry of Investment here, because they are the one who regulate and then know exactly the manifestation and in which the implication of the investment coming from China.
Okay. Thank you, His Excellency. So the impact investment could be elaborate more, maybe already done, but we need more data about that. I think I like that. So the next question is from Fadul Imansyah. How Islamic finance and investment adopt ESG, ecological, social, good governance concepts as currently being a worldwide topics? Can we say that Islamic finance and investment already suits with ESG concepts? I hope Professor Mehmet could answer this.
Yeah, could you please repeat the question? I was trying to answer another question on the system.
Oh, okay, sorry. How is Islamic finance and investment adopt ESG, ecological, social, and good governance concept, maybe like a green investment, as currently being a worldwide topics? Can we say that Islamic finance and investment already switch with ESG concepts, sir?
Okay, this is of course ongoing debate, and we receive a lot with the emergence of SDGs as well. Now, the important issue that we have to consider, as I try to explain, but the time was an issue, is when we look at the Islamic finance, the operation of Islamic finance and the theory. And in the theory, I try to explain this amazing world of Islamic economics and finance, which entirely aims at emancipation, empowerment, social development, environment, considering all the stakeholders in the process. But when we look at the whole operation of Islamic finance, is based on market logic rather than the Islamic logic. And hence the tension between these two logic, because market logic requires shareholder value maximization. However, Islamic logic requires stakeholder value maximization, if I use the word. And hence there's this inconsistency between the institutional form and the consequences it is produced. And therefore, when we look at the operation of Islamic finance, very much the form-oriented understanding has been hegemonic. In other words, as long as Sharia compliancy in the financial transaction is achieved, and that's it, halal. However, halalness cannot be limited to the form, but the consequences or the substance has to be halal as well. And therefore, as long as we remain within this negative screening area, within the form understanding area, when Sharia compliance is only limited to the form, unfortunately, we are even far from ESGs. Forget the Islamic ideals, but from the ESGs. And therefore, when we look at the writings as well, published in different reports, they would suggest that, yes, being Islamic, it suggests a particular morality. But when we look at the operation of Islamic finance, unfortunately, we do not see even ESGs. And therefore, we have to, we have to look into this new turn in Islamic finance. As I mentioned, the initial emergence was very much the credit, a social credit banking, Midgam or Tabung Haji in Malaysia, but important, of course, BMT experiment in Indonesia. Then Islamic commercial banks came, and then Islamic capital markets, financial markets, and etc. Now we are in this new turn. The new turn tells us that, look, guys, yes, we have been capitalizing, but the world and even the conventional banks are going in the ESGs and SDGs. you guys have to do something as well. And therefore, we have to go back to basics, not in terms of only ESGs and SDGs, but more importantly, more radically, more social dimension within the Islamic economics understanding. And therefore, I think it is your generation, this new generation, who has better understanding of finance and Islamic finance. We would hope to see that change being forward or brought forward and bring a new format, new institutional emergence for Islamic finance, so that the consequences of Islamic finance, not only the process, but the consequences of the Islamic finance can be as well socially, ethically, in terms of governance, can be acceptable. But for this, I have to state that regulative environment plays an important role, because unfortunately, the sector want to be regulated by the same regulative environment. However, if you subject Islamic banking to the same regulative environment, same criteria, such as the Basel criteria, then the qualities of Islamic finances diminishes, such as you won't be able to do profit and loss sharing, because that would imply higher risk portfolio, and therefore you will be classified as risky, and therefore no Islamic bank wants to be considered that way. And therefore we have to look into how specific Islamic finance specific regulation can be produced, rather than subjecting Islamic banks and financial institutions to the same regulation to enable Islamic finance to fulfill the aspirations that I try to explain here. However, in the short run, what we want to see Islamic finance and banking institutions to move into and consider ESGs as a framework in the short run, and therefore develop their ethical outcomes and the social outcomes in the process in line with the Maqasid al-Sharia.
Thank you, Professor.
Hope that responds. I have responded to some of the questions in the chat as well.
Okay, you can go on. You have a question that you want to answer? Professor?
No, I have already answered two or three questions in the chat box. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now we go to another questions, but some of the question already answered by the Professor Mehmet through his comprehensive explanation. From Mr. Tubagus Mansur, as I know, the head of MESH Egypt. What parameter to measure HCI? I think in Professor Mehmet's presentation already mentioned about it. And according to your forecast, Professor Mehmet, how is the growth of the Islamic economy in Indonesia? Maybe you have the data from the global data.
I think my data is very much on the distribution of the, I can share that as well. Let me just bring in terms of Indonesia, we can look into. Indonesia, of course, is an important country. Why? It is not because I'm in Indonesian event, but Indonesia is the largest Muslim economy and with the largest population. But what is also important that I want to share in relation to Indonesia is the nature of emergence of Islamic economics and finance. What excites me about Indonesia is the bottom-up process. Initially, Islamic finance is a bottom-up process. So when we look at the emergence of industry, Islamic finance industry, you have the Malaysian case, for instance, top-down and state-centric. State develops the Islamic finance. And what we call is the new corporatism. That is entirely state aims to develop Islamic capital as well. In a way, Islamic capitalism. And heavy financialization is taking place, however. Unfortunately, so the emergence of Islamic finance in Malaysia was very much in 1969 and onward for the Bumiputras, making lives of the Bumiputras better. But today, when we look at Islamic finance, mashallah, has expanded nearly over 30% of the financial system, but lives of the Bumiputras has not been affected. So that's important for us, the consequence of the top-down model. And then you have the GCC model of the top-down but business-centric. And in that case, again, we see the same consequences. However, what is important is the civil society-oriented bottom-up nature of Islamic finance emergence in Indonesia. So rather than waiting the center to establish Islamic banks or allow Islamic banks to be established, Indonesians cleverly organized the BMTs, for instance, the bottom-up process, and therefore affecting the empowerment process in the civil society and providing that opportunity space. And that is, I think, an important model that has to be sustained in Indonesia, and that can be an amazing model for the rest of the world. In the conferences that I go, I really appreciate the Indonesian model. Of course, in recent years, the center moved into it, and therefore the commercial Islamic banking is moving. But I think this civil society aspect, the BMTs and others, Waqf and Zakat, is an important part of the Indonesian model that we have to consider, because it is that model that can directly provide emancipation and empowerment to individuals on the ground. Banking, Islamic banking so far has not been able to touch the life of ordinary people on the ordinary streets. Of course, as His Eminent Ambassador talked about the SMEs and the microfinance, indeed, Indonesia has done amazingly in terms of financing SMEs and the microfinance. But also the important issue whether the Islamic finance can contribute to that process. But when we look at, therefore, if I share you with the Indonesian data, for instance, it should be somewhere here. So it is here, as you can see, it is again very much the, compared to other countries, still there's a certain importance of manufacture. But as we can see, real estate sector, banking and finance and consumer durables again gets the largest share of financing from Islamic banks. So yes, it is growing. It is doing very well. But when we look at even the financing nature, for instance, what particular instrument is utilized, again, what we see is mainly it is mainly the debt-based products, such as you can see at the top, Murabaha, and then the blue line is Musharaka because of the SM. Sorry, yes, Musharaka is in the increase, which is a positive, I guess, because of the SMEs financing. But mainly Murabaha is taking the lead in the process. So therefore, although compared to some other countries, Islamic finance in Indonesia is more embedded into real economy. But my fear is with the center-based expansion of Islamic finance, I hope we wouldn't lose such qualities, and the model, Indonesian model of Islamic finance can emerge. On the one hand, a bottom-up process in the civil society, and in the center, an Islamic finance which is geared towards social objectives and the real economy. Hope that answers.
Thank you, Professor. That answers some of the question in one comprehensive answer. Now, there's a question from Muhammad Kosin Akhia. How the potential of Islamic finance in the world to support of the SDGs programs? I want to let Mr. Muhammad Khair to answer this question according to your knowledge about the Singapore experience. Is Islamic finance there can support the SDG programs in Singapore? And so,
in the first place, I think the Islamic finance in Singapore is still, in a way, Islamic finance in general, it is still at its infancy stage, in my opinion. In fact, there was one bank created by DBS targeted at Islamic finance. It was actually closed recently because of the nature of the small market in Singapore. So that's why in my presentation, I actually cover a lot more on what the Muslim community has done for economic empowerment through productive wakaf, because that seems to be moving much better than the overall landscape of Islamic finance in Singapore. So that's my immediate response. Yes.
okay. So maybe it's more effective and easier because in geographical and numbers of population is more.
And also partly one of the reasons is because of the close proximity between, for example, Singapore and Malaysia. And we all know Malaysia has gone into Islamic finance way before. In fact, when I was in Harvard, a lot of discussions, and we find actually a lot of Muslim Islamic finance experts were in Harvard to actually participate in the discussion. So we could also see sort of a dichotomy between experts from Malaysia and also from the Middle East. There are different views on how things should be done, but the way I look at it, because of the proximity between Singapore and Malaysia, so that's why somehow the Islamic finance world in Malaysia has developed a lot more faster. So people, because of the proximity, eventually they choose to go to Malaysia rather than Singapore. Yeah. Among others, I know that there's a lot of other factors, but this is one which I observe to be the case. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
But I think, by and large, I think there's some questions there asking about wakaf properties in Singapore, how it's being developed. I think, yeah, whether we should answer that now.
Okay, we move to others issue, because we only have 30 minutes. We have many of questions, and we still have to aim our goal of this discussion and conference. It's a very complex things. His Excellency, Mr. Johari Oratmangun, let me ask one questions. We know that in China there are a huge community Muslim there. Is there any program that could be categorized as impact investment in China to empowering the Muslim community in China? Still mute, His Excellency.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I read a lot of some of questions as well. Let me try to answer that as well. Number one, there is a question from one of the participants that how the Chinese government supported the SMEs during the COVID pandemic. Yeah, and I think a lot of program has been implemented by Chinese government, in particular during the COVID-19 to support the SMEs. And I think if we look at the amount provided by the government during the COVID-19, in particular for the SMEs, it's more than $500 billion provided to support the SMEs. A lot of technical, they reduced the tax for the SMEs, easy to get credit from the bank, etc., etc. So there is some pro-SMEs policy by the government during the COVID-19. Now the question asking from you, yes, there is a special regulation in particular for the Muslim community in provinces as Xinjiang and then other province here in China. There is a pro SMEs in that area as well. But it's not put it in the policy as if it's for the Muslim community because the policy of the central government, but it's implemented through the region in which majority of the population is Muslims. To name some of them is Xinjiang province. I've been visiting Xinjiang a few times from the staff of the embassy, and we witness as well the policy as well as improvement of the economy in that area. And I think the priority is to bring that province to become the hub as well for the Central Asia and South Asia.
Thank you, His Excellency. So we know more about it. And now, because the presenters can answer the question through the chat box, I will add one more question to Professor Mehmet Asutai. Let me ask you directly. Most of the aspect of impact investment could be harmonized to Islamic finance. So, would you please share with us what is the differentiative characters between Islamic finance and impact investment? Because some overlap between them. In simple.
Yes, indeed. This is an important area, and we see a lot of similarities between impact investment, green investment, and social investment areas. As you can see in this graph as well, in particular when it comes to ethical part, of course, Islam being faith-based directly essentializes the ethics, and therefore through Sharia compliant financing and funds, there is this direct relationship. But what I would like to, it is visible here in this figure, the direct relationship. But beyond that, what is important in the Islamic finance and why we have not developed Islamic finance to the level of Islamic moral economy, but even to the ESG level, as I mentioned previously, Islamic finance until now is very much dealing with only capital movement, and they have unfortunately has not taken into account the consequences. It's only looking at the form but not the substance, and therefore the Sharia scholars in particular, we would expect from Sharia scholars not only essentialize the negative screening, because ESGs are directly related with positive screening. Okay, what positive outcomes you can produce, ecological outcomes, social outcomes, governance outcomes. However, as you can see on the slide here, Islamic finance so far is only on the left side, negative screening. They only look at whether riba is eliminated, gharar is eliminated, maisir, sin industries, and the leverage. However, Islamic finance have not moved into looking at the positive screening. In other words, what consequences the transactions, the so-called Sharia compliant transaction produces. You might have a project which passes the negative screening, that it doesn't have riba, it doesn't have gharar, it doesn't have maisir, it is not in the sin industry, the leverage is okay. But that project, when you approve that project, unfortunately that project perhaps is undermining a river in a particular district, is polluting a river or creating environmental pollution, or because of the project, a lot of people from that district has to be moved out. So when we look at the negative screening is not enough for us to reach ESGs. We need to develop positive screening to be able to bring ESGs or SDGs type of consequences into Islamic finance. And that's important because Islamic logic, the Tawheed, is the combination of negative and the positive, is the totality. Tawheed is related with totality. So methodologically, therefore, just looking at negative screening doesn't solve our problem. The Islamic methodology requires negative and the positive screening should be considered together, intention together with the consequence. However, currently Islamic finance is only operating on the intentional side, and it is not looking into what consequence it produces. Of course, anyone goes to Islamic bank for a financing, of course they have good intentions. But what is important, such as we do not say only that I have an intention to do my salah. No, we have to do the salah. The salah has to be actually conducted in the because that's the totality. Niyat or the intention has to be supported by the consequence. And Islamic finance therefore has to move into the consequentialist area in order to be able to fit into expectations in terms of ecology, governance, social impact areas. And this is important. Our Sharia scholars as well they have to be educated to understand all those. Thank you.
Thank you. So, if your explanation remind me on your publication at 2008 in New Horizon. In that publication, you said that has been the divergence between the aspiration of Islamic moral economy (IME) and the Islamic banking and finance (IBM) as an instrument of that system. I think your explanation is really relevant to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
We only have another 3 minutes to answer a question. Maybe we can jump to the next sessions. We need to close this question and answer. Our 30 minutes have effectively been used up. Sorry for the audience that not all the question already answered. Thank you to those who have been actively and lively trying to explore more regarding our focus discussion today. Of course, big thanks to our distinguished speakers for their sharing knowledge and insight with us. Thank you, Professor Mehmet Asutai, His
It's a
Excellency
pleasure.
Dr. Andes
Yes,
Johari
sir.
Mangun, and Mr. Muhammad Khair Muhammad Nur as our speaker today. Before I summarize our discussion today, I would like to ask each speaker to give a final closing statement of 2-3 minutes for each speaker. Let's start with Mr. Muhammad Khair.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very quickly, I was going through the questions pertaining to my presentation. Some are asking how Singapore government is support. Okay, basically is this. At the end of the day, wakaf development, productive wakaf development through impact investment, etc., contributes towards the national development of Singapore. So it is actually part of the economic development of Singapore. So that's why they are very supportive of wakaf development in Singapore, and their support is part of the multiracial philosophy of life in Singapore. So that's why we do not find many restrictions. The challenges is basically about how we can further manage and develop our properties, wakaf properties, and endowment properties to a greater height through innovative work between especially waris and also the fatwa community in Singapore. I think that's very important. They have come up with a lot of innovative ways still within the Islamic framework to help and to ensure that the wakaf properties in Singapore continue to develop and benefit the Muslims and of course the other communities in Singapore, inshallah. So that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad Khair. Now, His Excellency Dr. Andes Johari Mangun, please make your closing statement.
Thank you. In fact, this is a very interesting subject. Could be looking at the China policy. Could be a task for scholars, and in particular, Indonesians and other countries who pursue their high level degree in China. Yes. Because this is the different kind of system, but there is a lesson learned that can be gathered from what policy, China's policy, has been implemented so far. Whether this is in line. If we are talking about impact investment, of course, they put a lot of things on that as well. They're not calling that, but in the implementation of the policy, and then we can sense the elements of that. So this could be a good subject for scholars, and in particular for the Indonesian student, and I know a lot of them who pursuing a PhD and master degree on economics in China. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Mehmet and Professor
It's a pleasure.
Mr. Muhammad Khair, for your presentation. And looking forward for your PPT, I will ask from the organizer.
Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency Johari Mangun. The last statement from Professor Mehmet Asutai, please.
Thank you very much again. It has been a pleasure to be here. I really miss Indonesia. Of course, because of the COVID, we haven't been able to visit, but it is just before Fajr here, but I'm still with my passion here with you. Islamic finance is an amazing area. It is not because I'm Muslim, but I have intellectual conviction that Islamic finance, Islamic economics, Islamic moral economy, and as a result of that, Islamic finance can produce amazing outcomes to emancipate and empower individuals as well as the societies. However, we have to look into, rather than mimicking the conventional sector and therefore converging towards conventional through only capital movement, we have to remember that our objective are the humans and the other stakeholders and their well-being. And therefore we have to reorient Islamic finance towards the Islamic worldview and produce outcomes in relation to that. And Indonesia has a great potential, as I mentioned, mainly because of the civil society-based dynamic in Indonesia. And I have huge hope from the Indonesian model to be successful project for future and to be a call for development, peace, and solidarity. And that's the message of, very much the message of Islamic worldview. We want to see how individuals can be empowered and emancipated so that the peace can be established all over the world. After all, as I always say, I love this Indonesian definition of Rahmatul Alamin as a definition of Islamic economics, and we have to demonstrate through Islamic finance how that can be achieved. But for that, we have to really work hard rather than just following the market logic. We have to bring the Islamic logic back to Islamic finance to produce such consequences that we can be proudly say that this is consequence of Islamic worldview. Let's pray for that, inshallah. And I'm really grateful to my panelists, His Excellency, as well as Brother Mohammed Khair. It's good to be sharing this panel with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you as well.
Professor, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the principle of Islamic finance and impact investing, with their rigorous moral and social criteria, their emphasis on inclusiveness and a broader understanding of business-society relation complement each other. Both Islamic finance and impact investment occupy a value-based investment universe, associate themselves with a moral purpose, offer access to finance to those directly or indirectly kept out of the conventional financial investing arena, and share a broader understanding of the relationship between business and society. This similarity suggests that bridging the two sectors offers a promising avenue of response to the growing challenges related to development financing through collaboration, cross-learning, and reaching new markets. Islamic finance impact investing offers a potent new mechanism for fulfilling SDG poverty reduction targets by harnessing private sector finance targeted, in particular, and micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise, which are often excluded from the conventional mechanism. Ladies and gentlemen, Islam finance has widened the market for impact investor. Through Islamic finance impact investment, the poorer could gain greater access to finance and development opportunities, and the toolbox of Islamic financing instrument could be greatly enlarged. Now we have come to the end of this conference of the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum. I apologize if there are any words, statements, or gestures that seems inappropriate in moderating this conference. We sincerely hope that Islamic finance impact investment should enhance sustainable community empowerment, so the Islamic economy and finance in Indonesia will become more advanced and developed. Wallahul muwaffiq ila aqwamit. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you very much to the speakers and moderator who have filled the discussion of the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum today. Ladies and gentlemen, now we enter the Kahoot session. Ya, inilah saatnya kita beralih ke sesi Kahoot ya. Kita refresh sejenak dari pembahasan dan diskusi dari pagi tadi. Kita akan refresh dengan sesi Kahoot di mana para peserta Zoom di sini bisa mengikuti sesi Kahoot ini ya. Di kolom chat sudah kami berikan satu link untuk mengikuti Kahoot ini, atau Anda juga bisa join melalui www.kahoot.it, atau Anda juga bisa join Kahoot dengan mendownload aplikasi Kahoot ya. Dan ini dia sudah ada game pinnya, silahkan memasukkan game pinnya 1307925 dan jangan lupa untuk menuliskan nama sesuai nama Anda. Nama lengkap ya, agar nanti panitia lebih mudah untuk mencatat siapakah pemenangnya. Baik, segera saja langsung ikuti sesi Kahoot ini, karena sesi Kahoot ini menghadiahkan uang saldo elektronik sebesar Rp100.000 dan juga selimut Ikra Indonesia. Ini gampang-gampang banget pertanyaannya, nggak usah sulit-sulit, lumayan ya. Kita langsung saja ikuti. Wow, ini sudah banyak sekali yang mengikuti Kahoot sesi kali ini. Jangan lupa untuk klik link ya di kolom Zoom dan masukkan game pinnya serta nama lengkap dan nama asli ya, agar panitia lebih mudah nantinya. Oke, wah ini sudah banyak sekali. Ini jawaban-jawabannya seputar MES dan seputar acara hari ini ya. Jadi pastinya jawabannya gampang deh pokoknya ya. Oke, kita langsung saja mulai atau bagaimana, kita tunggu lagi. Sebentar lagi kita tunggu peserta untuk mengikuti Kahoot. Jangan lupa dimasukkan game pinnya ya. 1307925. Ya, dari mana saja bisa, dari aplikasi bisa, atau langsung saja klik linknya. Hadiahnya luar biasa, uang saldo elektronik sebesar Rp100.000. Baik, kita akan mulai untuk sesi Kahoot kali ini. Ya, sudah ada 126 peserta, kita masih tunggu. Oke, wah ini sudah banyak sekali dari seluruh Indonesia nih ya, ingin mengikuti meramaikan sesi Kahoot kali ini. Ya. Oke, kita masih tunggu untuk supaya pemenangnya. Oke, bisa? Oke, kita langsung mulai ya. Siap-siap. Kita hitung 3, 2, 1. Iya. Ini dia pertanyaan pertama. Silahkan langsung dijawab, apa singkatan dari MES? Masyarakat Ekonomi Syariah, atau Masyarakat Ekonomi se-ASEAN, atau Masyarakat Ekonomi Sejahtera, atau Mulia Effendi Siregar? Ini waduh, ini kalau jawabannya salah keterlaluan ini. Langsung saja dijawab ya, apakah singkatan dari MES? Oke, luar biasa. Ini pemenangnya banyak sekali. Ya, kita lihat dari leaderboard kali ini yang memimpin adalah Tuan Yogo. Baik, langsung kita beralih ke pertanyaan berikutnya. Pertanyaan kedua. Ya, siap-siap. Tahun 1443 Hijriah, MES memasuki usia keberapa? Nah, ini tadi disebutkan ya dalam para speaker kita pagi hari ini. Ada 31 tahun, 11 tahun, 21 tahun, atau 1 tahun. Ya, tahun 1443 Hijriah, MES memasuki usia keberapa? Iya, oke, ini dia jawabannya 21 tahun dan jawabannya mostly benar ya. Oke, luar biasa, dan kita lihat leaderboard kali ini. Yang memimpin adalah masih Tuan Yogo. Aduh, luar biasa. Oke, kita berlanjut ke pertanyaan berikutnya. Pertanyaan ketiga. Iya, manakah logo MES yang tepat? Nah, silahkan dicerna-cerna dulu logonya yang mana yang paling benar. Yang paling benar ya. Ada yang kehijauan, ada yang keputihan, nah ini ada yang ke orange-an. Nah ini logo-logo ini pasti sering sekali keluar nih ya. Warna-warnanya ini sudah bisa ditebak. Oke, ini dia logo MES yang paling tepat. Logo terbaru tepatnya ya. Oke, kita lihat siapakah pemimpin di board Kahoot. Masih Tuan Yogo. Oke, Tuan Yogo luar biasa nih. Kita lanjut ke sesi berikutnya. Pertanyaan berikutnya. Tahun 2021 IISF yang diselenggarakan oleh PPMS adalah penyelenggaraan keberapa? Wah, sudah mulai susah, sudah mulai berpikir. Oke, tahun ke-38, tahun ke-18, tahun ke-28, tahun ke-8. Tadi ulang tahunnya itu 21 tahun ya, berarti tahun ke-8. Oke, jawabannya adalah tahun ke-8 dan kita lihat pemimpinnya masih Tuan Yogo. Ini Tuan Yogo dari mana ya? Saya curiga ini dari dari orang MES juga nih, bukan ya? Oke, pertanyaan berikutnya. Hingga Oktober 2021, MES telah tersebar di berapa negara? Wah, mulai susah ya. Oke, nggak apa-apa. Dicoba dijawab saja teman-teman semua. 140 negara atau 10 negara, 14 negara atau 1 negara. Nah, itu dia, di 14 negara MES sudah tersebar, luar biasa. Kita lihat leaderboardnya. Ya, beralih ke Ibu Erna 08. Ya, kita berlanjut ke pertanyaan berikutnya. Pertanyaan keenam, apa nama website pengurus pusat MES? Wah, ini mudah sekali untuk dijawab. Ekonomisyariah.org, mesfoundation.id, yems.com atau sertifikasi LSP keuangansyariah.com. Yang mana? Silahkan dipilih. Ya, ekonomisyariah.org. Ya, itu dia, dan mostly juga dijawab dengan betul sekali. Dan pemimpinnya adalah Ibu Erna. Oke, Ibu Erna nih saing-saingan nih sama Tuan Yogo. Langsung kita lanjut. Pertanyaan ke-7. Siapakah nama Wakil Ketua Umum 3 PPMES yang telah memberikan sambutan acara IIEF? Pasti kalau yang mengikuti dari awal ini pasti tahu sekali nih ya. Silahkan dijawab. Mudah-mudahan betul semua jawabannya ini. Oke, kita tunggu jawabannya, dan jawabannya adalah ya, Bapak Bahlil Lahadalia. Betul sekali, luar biasa. Ini berarti 84 peserta ini yang mengikuti dari awal. Dan pemimpinnya masih Ibu Erna. Ibu Erna bertahan ya Bu. Ini Tuan Yogo sudah mulai tidak menjawab nih. Oke, pertanyaan ke-8. Siapakah nama Ketua Umum PPMES periode 1442 hingga 1445 Hijriah? Nah, baru menjabat nih. Siapakah beliau? Silahkan dijawab. Dan jawabannya adalah Bapak Erick Thohir. Ya, ini semuanya sudah bagus nih jawabannya, luar biasa. Oke, dan pemimpinnya adalah Ibu Erna. Ibu Erna bertahan Ibu, 2 pertanyaan lagi ya. Oke, siapakah nama Ketua Dewan Pakar PPMES periode 1442 hingga 1445 Hijriah? Ketua Dewan Pakar ya, Ketua Dewan Pakar. Perhatikan nih, pertanyaannya beda nih sama yang tadi ya. Pertanyaan Ketua Dewan Pakar PPMES adalah Bapak Peri Warjio. Ya, ini hampir betul semua, tidak apa-apa. Kita masih pertanyaan. Oke, Ibu Erna masih memimpin di bawah Listia dan juga Tuan Yogo. Gimana Tuan Yogo? Semangat Tuan Yogo ya. Pertanyaan terakhir, siapakah nama Ketua Dewan Pembina PPMES 1442 hingga 1445 Hijriah? Ketua Dewan Pembina ya, Ketua Dewan Pembina siapakah beliau? Dan jawabannya adalah Bapak Kiai Haji Ma'ruf Amin. Alhamdulillah sudah berjalan semua, dan kita saksikan podiumnya akan dipimpin oleh, ya ini dia, juara 3 ada Evi Syarif, juara 2 ada Listia, dan juara 1 adalah Ibu Erna 08. Yeay. Alhamdulillahirrabbilalamin, kita sudah mengikuti sesi Kahoot yang sangat menarik, dan kami ucapkan selamat kepada pemenang ya. Semoga hadiahnya bisa bermanfaat. Anda berhak mendapatkan hadiah dan silahkan menghubungi panitia. Terima kasih. Dan ladies and gentlemen, now we have arrived at the end of the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum. Our gratitude goes to the Central Board of MES, regional managers, special regional managers, MES regional managers throughout Indonesia, invited guests, and all attendees who have taken the time to attend the 8th Indonesia Islamic Economic Forum today. Hopefully the Islamic economic and finance in Indonesia will be more advanced and developed. That's all for today. Thank you very much for our speakers and moderator, and thank you very much to everyone who participate. Thank you for having me. Stay safe and be healthy. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Saya Indah Kirana. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.